Hey, what's going on, everybody? This your girl Tiffany here, live in effect. So today I want to talk about the African history being part of the diaspora. So this is my continuation with the FBA and the ADOS. All right. So I'm going to explain why African history is part of the diaspora. You know, there's been so many talks coming from these group of people that, we create black culture this, that, and the other. Black culture this, black culture that. Right? Well, it wouldn't be no black culture if it wasn't for the Africans. Because who you think was called black? The first people that was identified as Negro as being black were those Africans that were taken from their native land. Okay? So what happened was they synchronized African cultural practice with the Western culture. Okay? So when we talk about African history being part of the diaspora, we talk about African tribes. All right? And if you don't believe me, the information can be found in this book right here, Africanism in American Culture by Joseph E. Holloway. Okay. Now I'm going to read some of the information from this book, explaining why I say this, and then I'm going to say that the FBA, the members of the FBA and the ADOS need to do thorough history. You know what I'm saying? Because it seems like many of y'all just jumping on the bandwagon. Okay? So watch this. Let me go ahead and get into the information real fast. Okay, so let me go ahead and get into this information from the book. So watch this. African ethnicity on the American plantation, right? So it says the preference in South Carolina was for Africans from the Gambia region, the Windward Coast, the Grand Coast, the Bight of Benin, and Angola. One possible reason why Africans from Dahomey were rare in Charleston might be their notoriously strong military tradition, which aroused fear of possible insurrection in the mind of Charleston planters. Right? Watch this. It says the slave merchants took great care throughout the entire history of the South Carolinian trade to inform potential buyers of the African region and geographic point of origination of the slaves being sold. Many advertisements refer to the southern planters' familiarity with African ethnic origins, and advertisement for slave cargo occasionally gave the source from which the Africans originated. Now watch this. It goes in to talk about the African crops to the New World. So crops brought directly from Africa during the transatlantic slave trade, including rice, okra, tana, black-eyed peas, and kidney and lima beans. Africans ate them on board the slave ships. Other crops brought from Africa included peanuts, originating from South America, millet, sorghum, guinea melon, watermelon, yams, and sesame. These crops found their way into American foods way and appeared among the ingredients in the earliest cookbooks written by Southern American whites. All right. So watch this. It talk about the Mende and the Wolof people. The Mende and Wolof on the plantation. Mende and Wolof were two most widespread languages of the Senegambia, bilingualism was important for the trade and commerce in the region. During the 1700s, Wolof was by far the most dominant African culture found in the upper Guinea coast and coast of South Carolina. All right, for all you that claim to be Gullah Geechee people, and then you talk about you a FBA. According to this information, it says that during the 1700s, Wolofs was by the far most dominant African culture found in the Upper Guinea coast and the coast of South Carolina. And then it goes on to say the West African traders traded between Sierra Leone and Liberia, transmitting Fort Lord cuisine and language. All right, it says because of their civil war between 1685 and 1700, many Wolof arrived in colonial America as war captives, the only time that they came into North America in such numbers. Later in 1772, Fendy Lawrence, a Gambian slave trader, visited the American South as a free tourist and to conduct business. The government of Georgia issued her a certificate stating that a free black woman and heretofore a considerable trader in the river Gambia on the coast of Africa, hath voluntarily come to be and remain for some time in this province, with permission to pass and repass unmolested with the said province on her lawful and necessary occasion. Fendy Lawrence probably spoke Wolof and some Creole Pidgin English, the trade language of the West African coast. She apparently moved through the South without any problems and returned back to Gambia to continue her trade in slaves and other commodities. All right, so this is just an example of why how African history is a part of the diaspora history. Okay, I'm just giving you that example, so I just gave it to you. Now let's look at who is Fendy Lawrence. So Fendy Lawrence, let's look at who she is. Oh, my bad. I don't even think y'all heard me. Let me go back and read the article. I was reading the whole time and I had myself on mute. Okay, so I was reading about Fendy Lawrence. Okay, uh, she lived in pre-colonial Gambia near the Gambia River during the mid 18th century. While there, she acted as a go-between for the British and French traders and the local Africans. This was position afforded to her by marriage to an Englishman. Okay, so the only way that Fendy Lawrence was able to do what she did was because she was married to an Englishman. Okay, that's how she was able to earn her status. So let me share this information right here. So going down, it said that she took 5 personal slaves with her and arrived in Charleston, South Carolina after 36 days of sailing. Okay, so she was then accompanied by the captain of the vessel, Stephen Dean, to Georgia. All right, and then goes on to say that she would have been a native speaker of the Wolof, but in order to trade in Georgia, she would have spoken Creole. All right. So what I was doing is I was going down here where it says the Centenary. The Centenary were black and mulatto Senegalese women who have an influence via their marriage with European men and their patrimony. These women of color managed to gain some individual access, status, and power in hierarchies of the Atlantic slave trade. Okay, so the Centenaries commonly had power in network of trade and wealth within the limitation of slavery. So the influence held by these women led to changes in gender roles in the family structure archetype. Some owned masses of land as well as slaves. Okay, European merchants and traders, especially the French and the British, would settle on a coastal society inhabited by the Centenary in order to benefit from the increased proximity to the source of African commerce. So the Centenary's reputation for wealth became well known, exemplified in an account from Pernod de Pomgore, a French explorer who had been living in West Africa for 22 years until 1765. All right. So, what's the purpose of me going into this? To show that there is a lot when it comes to African history and slave history. Okay. So, what I'm showing you is that the diaspora would not be where it's at if it wasn't for African history. The African history plays a vital part in the diaspora history, whether it be good or bad or ugly. All right. Now, what I just read to you, okay, not many people heard about the Centenary. The Centenary are women from who were Senegalese, black or mulatto women that were married to European men in order to have status as slave traders. Okay, so not only we are a descendant of slaves, but we can also be descendant of those who were slave traders, and also a descendant of those who went from being slave traders to become a slave themselves, such as, let me show you, Ibraham Sory. Watch this. I have done a video on him before in the past, but Ibrahim Sory was a slave trader at one point in time. Then he ended up becoming a slave, right? Watch this. It says Abdul Rahim Ibrahim bin Sory was a Fula prince and emir from the Futa Jalana region of Guinea, West Africa, was captured and sold to slave traders and transported to the United States. Upon discovering his lineage, his enslaver, Thomas Foster, began referring to him as Prince, a title used for Abdul Rahman to his final days. Right? And it says he was born in Timbuktu, right? He was the son of Ibrahim Sory and a Moorish wife. He was when he was age 5, his father removed the family from Timbuktu to Timbo, now located in Guinea, right? It says, on returning to his homeland in 1781, he became a member of his father's army, being made a regimental commander for a campaign that conquered the Bambara. In 1788, he was given command of 200 cavalry troops for a campaign against the Hebos, who had been harassing the European ships that carried out the Fulani trade and wore captive slaves and the crops to sustain them during the Middle Passage. Though he initially defeated the Hebos, they later ambushed his cavalry in the mountains, and refusing to flee, he was shot, captured, and enslaved. At the time of his capture, he was married, having a son who in 1828 was serving as a military commander in Timbo. All right. So I'm saying this to say that Ibraham Sory was at a higher position. Okay, he was in a higher rank, but then he ended up becoming a slave. So we really have to go back into history to really learn how our people got here and how our people became what they are today. Somebody put, why don't you join us indigenous colored people of the what? Why don't you join us indigenous copper colored people of ancient Turtle Island? It is your destiny. No. And then this the problem right? Don't come with that pseudo shit. What the fuck is a Turtle Island? Golden brown. What the fuck is a Turtle Island? And this is the prime example right here that this person has to be an FBA, because these FBA folks talk that indigenous bullshit. They talk that indigenous bullshit, but they can't explain to you what the hell they talking about. But let me go ahead and share some more information with y'all. All right, so here's an article that I want to share with y'all. Watch this. It talks about the African diaspora, history, adaptation, and health. Right? It goes into the abstract. It goes into the introduction. So watch this. It says the African diaspora, history and definition. So the term African diaspora first appeared in the literature in the 1950s and had been broadly defined to include all global communities descended from the historic migration of people from Africa since the 15th century. This delineates it from the prehistoric out of Africa migration that led to the peopling of the world. The African diaspora has also been more narrowly defined to include only the transatlantic slave trade. This narrow definition, which emphasized the important roles that blackness, slavery, colonialism, racism, and geography played in sustaining the transatlantic slave trade, is the reason why some refer to the African diaspora as the black diaspora. So, the transatlantic slave trade was the single largest immigration of Africans from the old world to the new world. The first leg of the triangular trade involves ships from Europe carrying goods that were traded for slaves in Africa. The second leg, termed the Middle Passage, involved the shipment of between 12 and 14 million enslaved Africans across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas. The last leg was the transportation of goods, example, sugar, cotton, tobacco, rum, and molasses from the Americas to Europe. And it says most enslaved Africans were brought to European colonies in Latin America, while 3 to 5% were brought to the United States of America. These enslaved Africans and their descendants in the United States represent the group African American, as with the other diasporan population and indeed most of the world population. African Americans have multiple ancestry with lineages from Africa, Europe, Asia, and Native America, among others. Hence, the term African American is not genetically a homogeneous entity, as reflected in the fact that the self-identified African Americans include individuals ranging from almost no African ancestry to almost no European ancestry. Okay, so in addition, cultural diversity abounds in the descent of the African diaspora, as exemplified by Brazilians. So, with over 4 million slaves, Brazil has long been a melting pot of ancestries and cultures, as evidenced by the blending of African and European religions, such as Candomblé and Catholicism. All right, and it talks about the food, music, and dance. A recent census indicates that about 50% of the 200 million Brazilians self-identify as persons of African ancestry or mixed ancestry. All right, so these mixtures of ancestries acquired over 100 of years have serious implication for national and global biomedical initiatives, such as a precision medicine, because phenotypic appearance and self and group identification are unlikely to adequately capture the ancestral backgrounds of individuals that make up the African diaspora. Okay, so then right down here, watch this. It goes in to talk about the genomic profile of contemporary population of the African diaspora. So it says, in amidst African Americans, continental level differences between Africans and Europeans can explain up to 8% of the phenotypic variance across a range of anthropometric and cardiometabolic traits. Given the progress in delineate population structure at the subcontinental level described above, a deeper understanding of the fine scale genetic structure in African diaspora population is needed. So Western African ancestry is the predominant ancestry in the Mende people from Sierra Leone and Jola, Mendinka, and Wolof peoples from the Gambia. West Central African ancestry is the predominant ancestry in non-Bantu speaking people such as the Ja Adingbe people from Ghana and Isan Igbo and Yoruba people from Nigeria. So among the Bantu-speaking people, genetic differentiation following the Bantu expansion gave rise to distinct ancestry in West Central Africa, found in Benue and Ifang people in Cameroon and Congo. Okay, people from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Eastern Africa, found in Buganda, Burundi, etc., and South Africa. Okay. But yeah, this is so interesting. I kept saying this over and over. I kept saying this before. That we all got some form of Bantu in us. Because if you see, there's a correlation between those in South Africa and those in the diaspora. It's like, well, there's something genetically inclined in us that, show the similarity. And what it is the Bantu. It's the Bantu. It's the Bantu, yes. So we can't leave out the Bantu people. As a matter of fact, this book speaks on that. Let's go down here in this book. Let's go back to the book. It says the Bantu versus the Mende on the plantation, right? It says African transport during the colonial period were from the Guinea coast, largely Wolof, Fulani, Mendigo, and Bambara. Africans from the Senegambia were considered taller and of lighter complexion. A preference for light-skinned slaves to work in the house existed in Charleston, New Orleans, and other cities. It says while the Mendes were often enslaved and craftsmen, artisan, house servants, the field slaves were mainly Central Africans who, unlike the Senegambian, brought a homogeneous, identifiable culture. The Bantus often possessed good metallurgical and woodworking skills. they had a particular skills in ironworking, which they used in making the wrought iron balconies of New Orleans and Charleston. So, and I always wonder, well, there's a lot of similarity between the people in Charleston, South Carolina, and New Orleans. There's a lot of similarity. I mean, it's not just as far as their, I mean, one of them is their accent, is the way they talk. Because you'll think somebody from Charleston sound like they from New Orleans, or somebody from New Orleans sound like they from Charleston. Well, that explains the Bantu versus the Mende on the plantation. That kind of explains why, people in New Orleans and people in Charleston have a similar accent. Okay? Yeah. But, anyways, it says, as field workers, the Bantus were kept away from the developing mainstream of the white American culture. This isolation allowed Bantu culture to escape acculturation and maintain homogeneity, right? Certain ethnic groups from the Congo Angola region had a reputation for being adept at acquiring mechanical skills. Also, many were trained in and even dominated the barbering trade in South Carolina and performed the same tasks as free barbers, shaving, dressing hair, and setting wigs. They worked as a personal body servants and also were employed in shops owned by their masters. Then it goes down and says the cosmograms, grave design, and decoration and funeral practices, including the wake, are also Bantu in origin. Wait, no, let's go back. Bantu contribution to South Carolina and Louisiana include not only the popular wrought iron balconies, but also forms of wood carvings, baskery, woven cloth, and also an early aspect of ceramics such as clay baked figurines, and pottery. So cosmograms, grave design, and decoration and funeral practices, including the wake, are also Bantu in origin. Distinctive Bantu musical contribution include Bantu instruments such as banjos, drums, diddly, bowls, mouth bowls, quilts, washtub, bass, jugs, guns. I mean not guns, gongs, GONGs, bells, rattles, autophones, and this one is, I think it's pronounced as lokimini, a 5-string harp. The Bantus constitute the largest African group in South Carolina and possibly in several other areas of the southeastern United States, including Alabama, Louisiana. So, Neville J. Heskovitz noted that the Bantu center in North America was the South Carolina Sea Islands off the coast of Carolina. Let me see. That kind of tripped me out first time I went to South Carolina. Yeah, because I knew that there's a lot of similarity as far as like the accent is concerned. So when I hear somebody in South Carolina, especially a person that's Geechee, I hear that New Orleans sound, and then when I hear somebody from New Orleans, I hear a little Geechee. It's like, okay, well, there's something. That's something in line with this. It's something that is a connection. But I didn't know the Bantu play a part in that. But I figured that was something that's connected between those in South Africa and those in the diaspora, right? Because if we study about the Bantu expansion, which I'm gonna go into a little bit about the Bantu expansion, man, go on with that pseudo ass shit you talking. You pseudo as hell. Go on with that pseudo ass shit. I don't care about no damn documentary that you talking about. That's pseudo. You pseudo. That when you start talking about Turtle Island, you start to sound pseudo as hell. Okay? But watch this. Let's go into the Bantu expansion real fast and then I'm gonna get back to the article. Nah, Golden Brown is being pseudo. Talking about some Turtle Islands. Okay, hold on. Let's go ahead. Let's go into this article. Watch this. Watch this. It says the genetic legacy of the expansion of Bantu speaking peoples in Africa. Watch. I'm going to skip the abstract. Okay, now let's go down to the main. It says African population speaking Bantu languages, right, constituted about 30% of African total population, of which about 350 million people across 9 million kilometers speak more than 500 Bantu languages. Archaeological, linguistic, historical, and anthropological sources attest to the complex history of the expansion of the Bantu speaking people across the sub-equatorial Africa, which fundamentally reshaped the linguistic, cultural, and biological landscape of the continent. So there is a broad interdisciplinary consensus that the initial spread of Bantu languages was a demic expansion, and ancestral BSP, which stands for Bantu speaking people, migrate first through the Congo rainforest and later to the savannas further east and south. However, debates persist on the pathways and modes of the expansion. Watch this. It says, whereas most recent human expansion involved latitudinal movements through regions with similar climate condition, the expansion of the Bantu speaking people is notable for its primary longitudinal trajectory, traversing regions with highly diverse climates and biomes, including the highlands of Cameroon, Central African rainforests, African savannas, and arid southwestern Africa. All right, now let's go further down. Let's go further down. So here's a graph. Let's see if I can pull this graph up right here. All right, so the population structure within the sub-Saharan African populations. Watch this. Okay, so it shows the Niger Congo. All right, and it talks about the Northwest Bantu speaking. All right, Southwest Bantu. So here's the graph right here. Now let's go further down. Admixture influences genetic structure. So after quality control merging with publicity available data from representative ethno-linguistic groups, we assemble a data of 4,950 individuals for 124 population, right? And it says here after referred to as the African Neo dataset to visually represent genetic affinities between population, we apply four dimensionality reduction methods and found evidence for a fine-scale population structure between sub-Saharan African population with a clear geographical component and a broad correspondence with the main linguistic groups in Africa. All right. So it says the population substructure and suggestions of admixture are also apparent in model-based clustering analysis and show a final representation of population ancestry with the three Bantu-speaking people associated genetic components. The dark green components found in most Bantu-speaking people, the light blue components shared between non-Bantu Niger-Congo and Western Bantu-speaking people, and the orange component mainly found in southern eastern Bantu-speaking people. Okay, so they talking about this picture right here. Okay. Now, by the way, this is scientific information. And you can't beat science unless you got something that can actually go above and beyond it. Okay? This is scientific knowledge. So science and history correlates with each other. Science and history goes hand in hand. She is still young. She has time to learn, so I won't destroy her channel. Hopefully she... Stop. First and foremost, I'm a 34-year-old woman. Okay, I'm not new to this. I'm not new to this nonsense that you're talking. All right, Golden Brown. I have had this conversation and discussion with people about the stuff that you're talking about, so I'm not new to this. All right. Now you can try that with somebody that's way younger than me and that doesn't know anything, don't have any knowledge about history, but you're not going to try that with me. You know what I'm saying? I studied the information. I have had conversation with people. So find somebody else you want to play that game with, okay? Because I'm one of those people that if you're going to come with that, you better come with some sources. If you can't come with no sources, you better fall back. You better fall back because I'm not going for it. So you can try that shit with somebody else. You can run that stupid game on somebody else, but you ain't going to run that game on me. And it's better yet, since we here talking about FBA, Golden Brown, I want you to answer me a question. I got a question to ask you. Why did Tariq Nasheed went from talking about African history, Caribbean history, to all of a sudden having some type of confrontation with those in the African continent and the Caribbean? How he go from talking about African history, because in the beginning when he started Hidden Colors, he was talking about African histories. Yeah, although some of those information was pretty pseudo, however, he was starting off with African history, and he did a documentary about Haiti. Okay, which I thought that was a pretty good documentary, by the way, because you know he had the historians that was of Haitian background, and he had people who legitimately talk about Haitian history. So the question is, how did he go from talking about African history, Caribbean history, to now all of a sudden he has some type of some form of animosity towards these people, and now he doesn't have anything, or he doesn't want anything to do with being African or being, or you know, anything to do with the other part of that diaspora, but all of a sudden he wants to bring in this concept about the foundational Black America, the Black Indians, and all this stuff. I mean, just explain that to me. I want you to give me an accurate answer, and if you can't give me an accurate answer, then I'm not trying to hear what you guys say. Okay, do that for me. Again, find somebody else to play with. Okay. Anyways, so what I was saying, basically, you cannot go over science unless you got anything that could really disprove the scientific knowledge that I just presented to you. And by the way, both of these sources, which one comes from the National Library of Medicine, right, for the National Center for Biotechnology Information, and the other one came from the nature.com website, which is both scientifically, you know, scientific research and based on scientific evidence. Again, you cannot have history without having science, because if you don't have the science, then you won't have the history. And if you don't have the history, then you won't be able to gain the concept of politics. So yes, this all ties down into the political arena. So you got to deal with the science, the history, which coincide and complement each other, which brings about the politics. So now I'm going to ask you, FBA and ADOS people, have y'all really dealt with the science? Have y'all really dealt with the history from a thorough point of view? And do you understand what it means to be politically on that foundation? Do you understand what's the politics? Because everything has a politics to it, right? So before we get to talking about all this politics and stuff, what have you really studied? How far along are you in history? If you're not that far along in history, right, there ain't no way in the hell you can come and talk that smack to me. I see a lot of y'all shitting on me, trying to call yourself shitting on me, trying to call yourself hating on me from my last videos that I did. But I'm glad that y'all came on there and comment. I'm glad that y'all, you know what I'm saying, you're in your feelings. I'm glad. I'm happy that you're in your feelings. Because I wish y'all had that same question for y'all leaders. I wish I had this question for Yvette Carnell. I wish I had some question for Antonio Moore. I wish I had some question for Tariq Nasheed. I wish I would have asked them some questions. But it seemed like to me that you guys are jumping on the bandwagon. and y'all not really going to study this information for yourself. Okay, but since we're gonna talk about the politics, right? But since we're gonna talk about the politics, let's go into how many of y'all know about this. Let's go into it. All right, so let's talk about this for a moment. Okay. So, how many of you know about the black family who won the return of Bruce Beach will sell it back to LA County? So it says nearly 100 years ago, a local government in Southern California took Bruce Beach away from its black owners because of the color of their skin. The owners' descendants won a long effort to regain the land, and now they intended to sell it to Los Angeles County for nearly $20 million. The return of Bruce Beach to the descendants of Willa and Charles Bruce last summer was hailed as a step towards righting the wrongs inflicted by systemic racism. County officials say the pending sale will go some way towards restoring the wealth that was stripped from the Bruce family in 1924. So watch this, and it says that the Bruce Beach will open a new chapter. This fight has always been about what is best for the family, and they feel what is best for them is selling this property back to the county for nearly $20 million, says Los Angeles County Board of Supervisor Chair Janice Hahn, as the plan was revealed on Tuesday. All right, now this article came out on January the 4th of 2023. How many of y'all actually know about this? How many of y'all actually talked about it? Hmm? Or let's go into another one. Alright, I'm back. My service just went off. Alright, so I had lost connection. Black activists, who are you? Who are you? You got something you want to say? You want to come up here? You want to come up here? Cause I won't want y'all FBAs and ADOS come up here talking that shit. Cause I'm gonna rip a hole through y'all head. So I'm waiting for Black activists to respond if you want to come up here. Y'all don't want it with me. Y'all better chill the fuck out. Y'all motherfuckers don't want it with me. Y'all motherfuckers do not want it with me. Alright, back to what I was saying before. Alright, so let's talk about the grave sites. Hold on, let me see if I can. Alright, so I'm back. I hope y'all can still see me. Again, the connection had went out on me, so but anyways. So I'm waiting for one of you FBA and ADOS motherfuckers to come over here and talk that bullshit. I'm waiting for one of y'all motherfuckers so I can rip a hole in y'all head. I'm waiting. I mean, if y'all can disprove me or discredit the information that I posted on here, then I'll shut up. Until then, y'all don't want it with me because I'll rip your motherfucking head off. Real talk. Alright, so back to what I was saying before. Anyway, so how many of y'all know about the Nightdale community raising funds for historical marker at long neglected slave burial grounds? So now this is in North Carolina. Benjamin Lang has jogged past the wooded area in Wisewater Village community, but unbeknownst to him, lost history was hidden in plain sight. And it goes down to say, according to the North Carolina Office of State Archaeology, the site has been identified and labeled as the Hilton Slave Cemetery in 1995. Documents show that there are 130 graves there that may be temporarily associated with early 19th century residents in East Wake County. Another document for the North Carolina Historic Preservation Office stated that those residents were the Hilton family and they owned what was Midway Plantation. Census records from 1860 listed 126 enslaved people living on the property. The owner at the time was Charleston Hinton, who was one of very few men living in Wake County with more than 100 slaves. Some of them are buried here in Wide Waters. Jackson says she believed her family is there too. All right, and so they starting to GoFundMe. It says this mission is personal for her. That's why she's calling on the community to help clear debris and loss. She sent out a call for residents turned volunteers who are trying to raise $2,000 through a GoFundMe to purchase a historic marker. So when I saw the filler, I felt obligated, being that some of my ancestors lied there, said residents Donald Dibnam. Without them, I wouldn't be here. So Dibnam is also a descendant of the Hitson family. Both he and Jackson feel a personal responsibility to not let their ancestors down. I just feel like the grounds were talking to me. They were talking to me and saying, "Thank you for not forgetting about me," she said. "Thank you for not letting nothing like concrete come over us. Thank you for bringing awareness to the community." All right, so this article came out Tuesday on April 23rd of 2024. How many of y'all knew about this? How many of y'all even pay attention to this type of information? If you really say that you're about your ancestor and you really stand on the foundation of these people, how many of y'all gonna do whatever you can to make sure you preserve the site and the foundation or the areas where your ancestors were at? But let y'all talk about it. Your favorite leaders, all they talk about is celebrities. You know what I'm saying? And then they like to create wars with other people from the diaspora. They creating wars to see who better than who. It seems like it. The politics of respectability. But nobody really talks about the historical events that actually impacted us. Okay? Or the areas that was once belonged to black people, or where black people stood their foundation on. I don't hear none of the FBAs or ADOS saying, well, you know what, let's go to these sites, let's go to these locations so we can pay respect and homage to those people. At least let's try to preserve something that belongs to the people. Yeah, y'all talk about reparation, but reparation is not a new talk. Reparation been about for a long period of time. Reparation ain't nothing new. Okay? And I think that's why many of y'all jump on the bandwagon, because y'all hear the word reparation and y'all thinking money, right? Y'all thinking money, 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 money. That's what y'all thinking about. Y'all ain't thinking about, well, how do we pay homage to those ancestors? How do we pay homage to those people? How do we let's go and find out what land or what territory, what city they once occupied or they found it, so that way we can protect it from the investors or protect it from those who trying to conquer the areas. I don't hear that talk. I don't hear that damn talk at all. So once I hear that, once I hear you guys actually making it your business to go to the local city mayors, right, the councilmen, and try to put up a fight to preserve the location, the areas that was once occupied by the black community, then I can say, okay, you're doing the work. But until then, y'all can miss me with that shit y'all talking. Y'all can miss me with the shit you talking. Until you can give me accurate information about why we should not study African history and why we should not connect African history with the diaspora, I'm not trying to hear that shit y'all talking. Fuck y'all. Fuck that shit y'all talking. Until y'all can prove to me why we don't need to be studying about African history and why we don't need to have no type of connection with African history, especially here in the diaspora. If y'all can give me a legitimate reason, a great reason why we should not even consider to be dealing with African history as a whole, then I would listen to what y'all have to say. Until then, fuck y'all. Fuck that shit y'all talking. I don't give a fuck about y'all being y'all feelings. Y'all can stay in y'all feelings all you want to. I can give two shit about that. Because you can't separate that shit. Y'all try to separate it, but you can't separate that shit. Again, y'all try to separate, but you can't. You can't separate it. No matter what you try to do, you cannot separate, because when you do that, it's like you separating yourself from your own family. Oh, and for those of you, and I heard somebody say something about Marcus Garvey and his work, right? And I would say this. I'm not a Garveyite. I'm not a Garveyite. However, Garvey made a lot of great points regarding to black nationalism. Okay? So yes, I do subscribe to black nationalism. And as you know, I do subscribe to Pan-Africanism as well. Okay? I'm 5'2". I wish I was. I wish I was that tall, but I'm not. I just got broad shoulders. That's all. But anyways, I hear people, throwing shade at Marcus Garvey. You know what I'm saying? As far as his ideas is concerned. Now, I'm gonna say this: Garvey wasn't a perfect man. Okay, Garvey wasn't perfect. Neither one of these leaders or people that came before us, they weren't perfect at all. They all made their mistakes. They all made choices. They all did things that caused people to walk away from them or don't want to be a part of their organization. But I will tell you this. I will read this information to y'all. This book right here, Wise Minds on Marcus Garvey. Watch this. Okay, so he wrote, he did a speech on the Declaration of the Rights of the Negro People of the World. Now watch this. It says, number one, it says, let me see, do I want to be number one or, okay, let me go down. It says, in order to encourage our race all over the world and to stimulate it to a higher and grander destiny, we demand and insist on the following Declaration of Rights. And watch this. He say, be it known to all men that whereas all men are created equal and entitled to the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and because of this, we duly elected representative of the Negro people of the world, invoking the aid of the just and almighty God, do declare all men, women, children of our blood throughout the world free citizens, and do claim them as free citizens of Africa, the motherlands of all Negroes. And then he also said that we believe in the supreme authority of our race in all things racial, that all things are created and given to man as a common possession, that there should be an equitable distribution and apportionment of all such things, and in consideration of the fact that as a race we are now deprived of those things that are morally and legally ours, we believe it right that all such things should be acquired and held by whatsoever means possible. And it says that we believe the Negro, like any other race, should be governed by the ethics of civilization and therefore should not be deprived of any of those rights or privileges common to other human beings. So, and then he also go down and say, we believe in the inheriting rights of the Negro to possess himself of Africa, and that his possession same shall be regarded as an infringement of any claim or purchase made by any race or nation. And he says, we believe all men entitled to common human respect, and that our race should in no way tolerate any insult that may be interpreted to mean disrespect to our color. All right, so Marcus Garvey, his whole thing was to make sure that the collective of black people gained their proper due and their respect, you know what I'm saying, throughout the world. So nowhere did I hear Garvey make a separatism. You know what I'm saying? I don't think Garvey ever talked about, well, let's not deal with these people over here or let's put these people over there. Again, Garvey was not a perfect person. He was not perfect. Nobody is. But he had great ideas. And his foundation is very thoughtful and very logical. All right. Now, he had some misinformation, okay, because he used the term Ethiopia, which I get it at that time period, you know what I'm saying? They didn't have access to a lot of stuff like we do today. However, Garvey had the right idea and it had the right foundation. And Garvey wasn't the only one. W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Alexander Carmel, Mark Delaney, those individuals, they had the right foundation. They had the right ideas. They had the right ideas as far as like what direction they wanted the people to go. So if you think that fighting for the rights for people collectively, as far as a race of people that has been oppressed and that are a victim of the transatlantic slave trade, if you think that's wrong, then what other solution do you have? If you want to create separatism and you want to totally delineate yourself from certain individuals, right? or delineate yourself from a population where your ancestor came from, then it doesn't make sense. It's one thing to have a subculture. It's one thing to have a subgroup. But it's another thing when you try to delineate. Like, that does not make any sense. It's very illogical. So again, I don't give a fuck if y'all get mad at me, because ain't now one y'all said nothing. I don't hear nobody saying that. I don't hear nobody saying, well, look, let's not create diaspora wars. Let's not go back and forth with individuals from the continent or from the Caribbean, but let's help them to understand what we're trying to do as far as like creating our own subgroup. If you would have did that, then that would have made more sense. But y'all want to create wars with people. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, you still losing, because guess what? You still not getting what you need, and you really going against the wrong people. The people that you should be going against is the people that's really telling you that you cannot live in certain neighborhoods, that's incarcerating your people. That's who you should go against. You should go against your own government system, but you're not doing that. You're going against people that you say are allies. If these people are supposed to be the allies, then why are you going against them? Why are you going against people who are supposed to be your allies? Why are you not taking that? But a lot of y'all won't say nothing about the government. A lot of y'all won't say much about these white people, the way that y'all come at other black people or black immigrants. But then y'all get mad when a black person, or a black person who is a black immigrant, who knows a lot about history, who studies history, you get mad with them, right? You take your anger out on those people. But you ain't got that type of smoke for when white people study history, or if a Jewish person study our history. You ain't got that kind of smoke with them, but you got smoke for other black people, right? You don't care that much about your damn history. You don't even care that much about your own community to be trying to have smoke with somebody else. A lot of y'all don't. A lot of y'all just jumping on this because it's a very popular thing. Y'all jumping on the bandwagon. Y'all personality worshiping. That's what y'all doing. Personality worshiping, jumping on the bandwagon. Y'all don't give a fuck about this. And I said that shit. And I'm not gonna apologize for what I said either. Because once I start seeing what the whole agenda is about and what's the whole purpose, that's what caused me to lose respect. You're not winning. You're not getting anywhere. So sitting up here dissing other African people or people from the diaspora is not going to get you anywhere. It's not going to get you what you want out of this country. It's not going to get you the resources. Because you still on a losing team, dumbass. Y'all ass is still on the fucking losing team. Y'all not fucking winning. So sitting up here talking shit about black immigrants or black Caribbean people or people who are born of parents that are immigrants or Caribbeans ain't gonna help you not one bit. You're not fucking winning. You look like some fucking jackass. Y'all some bunch of jackasses. And oh, well, what about those black people that talk down on black American people? Okay, some of those individuals, they full of it too. Some of those individuals, they full of it. But I'm talking about the FBA and the ADOS folk, because y'all the ones that's really trying to create that division for real. Y'all know what the fuck y'all doing. So miss me with that shit you damn talking, and let somebody tell y'all the truth. Who is a black immigrant or who knows history, then y'all want to get defensive and get mad at them and try to antagonize them. No, motherfucker, you ain't study your information. You ain't study no goddamn history. But you don't have that same smoke for a white person that could tell you about your own history. You agree with them. But let it be a black person or black Caribbean or somebody that's a black immigrant from Central West Africa that tells you something based on what they study, what they know. You got smoke for them, but you ain't got smoke for these white or Jewish people if they tell you the same thing. Y'all full of shit, man. Y'all full of it. You might as well be a white supremacist your damn selves. Y'all might as well. Because y'all don't have the same smoke for white people the way that y'all have smoke for other black people. But let y'all go back and say, well, you know, they sold us to the Europeans. They sold us to the white people. They traded us off. Not everybody was involved in the slave trade. Not everybody was involved in the slave trade. Okay? There were those that did. There were those that did, but not everybody was involved in the slave trade. Why should we have something to do with those people? They sold our people into slavery. There was those that did, but there was those who were in. There were those who were coerced, right? They were coerced to sell the slaves to the Europeans. See, that's the other part that y'all be missing. See, y'all only focus on the part of those who traded the African people, but y'all don't look at those who were forced to sell African people. And y'all don't look at how the Europeans forced their way through these African countries to grab up more slaves, even after slavery was abolished. Even after slavery became illegal, they still grabbed up some more slaves and brought them here in this country. See, that's the part that y'all not looking at. That's how I know that a lot of y'all ain't studied slavery. That's how I know that a lot of y'all ain't studied history. Because it's more to it than what you just know. It's more to it than what you just. It's more to it than the information that you're receiving. That's how I know that a lot of y'all ain't took the time out to do your actual research. That's how I know y'all ain't taking the time out to do your own homework assignment. Y'all not actually studying this shit. There's a lot to it than what you think you know. Oh, and let me go get some real fast. I got another book for y'all asses. All right, so this book right here is called "The Half Has Never Been Told: Slavery in the Making of American Capitalism," written by Edward E. Baptist. Now check this out. Edward E. Baptist happened to be a white man. This white man, let me show you something. This book right here that I'm holding up, "The Half Has Never Been Told: Slavery in the Making of American Capitalism," Edward E. Baptist. This was a white man that wrote this book. This man wrote this book here. And I remember Yvette Carnell was showing this book on her channel. Wait a minute. But it was written by a white person. But there was no smoke for this white man because he wrote this book. But let it be a book like this, Capitalism and Slavery, written by Eric Williams, who was a prime minister from Trinidad, a black man from Trinidad. Okay. Now remind you, this book was written in 1944, and it was republished again around 1994. So this book was first published in 1944. All right, but the information is very accurate in this book. Very accurate. However, but let y'all say something. Let you FBAs and ADOS say something. Say, oh, he's Trinidadian. He's from Trinidad. He ain't got no business telling our story about our history, this, that, and the other. He's from Trinidad. Now, he talks about slavery in general. He doesn't just talk about slavery just dealing with Trinidad. He talk about slavery in general, right? But let y'all say, oh, he from Trinidad. These Trinidadian folks can't be talking about black history. These black immigrants, they need to stop talking about black history. But y'all don't have no smoke if it was coming from a white man named Edward E. Baptist. And there's great information in this book, but still, it's no problem if a white person wrote history about slavery and about African people, right? But it's a problem when it comes from a black immigrant or somebody that's from the Caribbean, right? I'm trying to say, make it make sense. Don't worry about my family. Where's your family from? Don't worry about my family. Make it make sense, man. Y'all don't have no problem. See, y'all biased as fuck. Y'all have no problem when it comes to somebody outside your own race writing history about black history. But if it's somebody that's a black immigrant or black Caribbean, right? You know what I'm saying? It's a problem. Make it make sense. Help me to understand that logic. Help me to understand the logic. Y'all just as prejudiced as your white counterparts. Y'all just as prejudiced as your white counterparts. Hmm. But watch this. I'm about to share some information with y'all that came from Dr. Eric Williams. Watch this. I'm finna share some information with y'all. Watch this. It says the indentured servant was not forthcoming in sufficient quantities to replace those who had serviced their term. On plantation, escape was easy for white servants, less easy for the Negro who, if freed, tended in self-defense to stay in his locality where he was well known, and less likely to apprehend a vagrant or runaway slave. The servant expected land at the end of his contract. The Negro, in a strange environment, conspicuous by his color and features, and ignorant of the white man's language and ways, could be kept permanently divorced from the land. Racial differences made it easier to justify and rationalize Negro slavery to the exact mechanical obedience of a plough ox or a cart horse to demand that resignation and that complete moral and intellectual subjection which alone make slave labor possible. Finally, this was the decisive factor. The Negro slave was cheaper. The money which was procured a white man's servants for 10 years could buy a Negro for life. And he goes on to say, as the governor of Barbados stated, the Barbadian planters founded by experience that 3 blacks work better and cheaper than 1 white man. And it goes on to say, kidnapping in Africa encountered no such difficulties as were encountered in England. Captains and ships had the experience of the one trade to guide them in the other. Bristol, the center of the servant trade, became one of the centers of the slave trade. Capital accumulated from the one financed the other. White servitude was the historic base upon which Negro slavery was constructed. It says the felon drivers in the plantation became without effort slave drivers in significant numbers, writes Professor Phillips. The African were latecomers fitted into a system already developed. Did you know that? So there was already practice of slavery, right? But however, the reason why black people became slaves is not because of their race, it's because it was cheaper to own black slaves. In other words, it was economical reason. That's why they own slaves. Okay? And here then is the origin of Negro slavery. Watch this. The reason was economic, not racial. Economics, not racial. It had to do with, it had to do not with the color of the laborer, but the cheapness of the labor, as compared with Indian and white labor. Negro slavery was intimately superior in each case, Wright Bassett discussing North Carolina. It was a survival of the fittest. Both Indian slavery and white servitude were to go down before the black man's superior endurance, docility, and labor capacity. So the features of the man, his hair color, and the tentrifies his subhuman characteristics so widely pleaded were only the latter rationalization to justify a simple economic fact. The colonies needed labor and resorted to Negro labor because it was cheapest and best. This was not a theory, it was a practical conclusion deducted from the personal experience of the planter. He would have gone to the moon if necessary for labor. Africa was nearer than the moon, nearer to than the more populous countries of India and China, but their turn was to come. This white servitude is of a cardinal importance for an understanding of the development of the New World and the Negro's place in that development. It completely explodes the old myth that the whites could not stand the strain of manual labor in the climate of the New World, and that for this reason and this reason alone, the European powers had recourse to Africans. Okay? And then it goes on to say the unbearable humidity of August day in some parts of the United States has no equal in the islands. Moreover, only the southern tip of Florida in the United States is actually tropical, yet Negro labor flourished in Virginia and Carolina. The southern parts of the United States are not hotter than South Italy or Spain, and D. Tocqueville as why the European could not work there as well as in those countries. When Whitney invented his cotton gin, it was confidently expected that cotton would be produced by free labor on a small farm, and it was, in fact, so produced. Where the white farmers were ousted, the enemy was not the climate but the slave plantation. The white farmer moved westward until the expansion plantation sent him on his wandering again. Right in 1857, Winston pointed out the labor in the fields of the extreme South and all heavy outdoor work in New Orleans were performed by whites without any ill consequences. No part of the continental borders of the Gulf of Mexico, he wrote, and none of the islands which separated from the ocean needed to be abandoned to barbarism or Negro slavery. In our own time, we who have witnessed the dispossession of Negroes by white sharecroppers in the South and the mass migration of Negroes from the South to the colder climates of Detroit, New York, Pittsburgh, and other industrial centers of the North can no longer accept the convention rationalization that Negro labor was employed on the slave plantation because the climate was too rigorous for the constitution of the white man. A constant and steady immigration of poor whites from Spain to Cuba to the very end of Spanish dominion characterized Spanish colonial policy. Fernando Ortiz had drawn a striking contrast between the role of tobacco and sugar in Cuban history. Tobacco was a free white industry intensively cultivated on small farms. Sugar was a black slave industry intensively cultivated on large plantations. He further compared the free Cuban tobacco industry with its slave Virginian counterpart. And this came from Dr. Eric William. All right. So he told you that one of the reasons why black people were brought here to the Atlantic was because the labor was cheap. Meaning that it was cheaper to get a bunch of Negroes and bring them here to America than it is to keep white people and Indian people. Okay? It was cheaper to get Negroes from Africa than it was to keep white servants and the rest of them. So Negroes were a lot cheaper. Black people was cheaper and they made more profit for the economy. Okay? All right, so watch this. Here's this book. The Half Has Never Been Told. This was written by the white man. Watch this. It says, in 1807, British Parliament passed a law ending the international slave trade to its empire in the near future. So Britain's government and ruling class, confident that their own abolition of the trade had provided them with what historian Christopher Brown have amply called moral capital, would use the weight of their growing economic influence to push Spain, France, and Portugal towards abolishing their own Atlantic slave trades. And it says, meanwhile, the U.S. Congress had already been pushing forward its own bill to ban the international slave trade to the United States starting in 1808, the first year that the Constitution permitted. But this slave trade ban, urged by Thomas Jefferson in his 1806 annual message to Congress, was a political possibility in part because the Middle Passage was no longer seen as an economic necessity. Feet marching west, south, and southwest enabled slaveholders in the new western district of South Carolina, Georgia, and elsewhere to buy from an endless coffle of people like Charles Ball. Thus, the bill passage did not mean that the Southern representative who voted for it believed that slavery was wrong, as one of them insists proudly, a large majority of people in the southern states do not consider slavery as a crime. Watch this. In any case, the Haitian Revolution had already made it possible for the United States to open up the Mississippi Valley to the young nation international slave trade. About 10 days before the Declaration of Independence in Port-au-Prince on December 22nd, 1803, Louisiana new territorial government had accepted the official transfer of authority in New Orleans. American acquisition depended on the sacrifices of hundreds of thousands of African men, women, and children who in Saint Domingo rose up against one social institution whose protection appeared to be written into the United States Constitution, the enslavement of African people. The reliance on the success of the Haitian Revolution was profound irony. Jefferson, whose argument for diffusion relied in part on exploiting white fears of slave revolt, did not acknowledge that Toussaint post hominis victory made the nation and slavery's expansion possible. The only voice pointing out that the Republican president was an emperor without clothes came from Jefferson's old rival, Alexander Hamilton, who wrote that to the deadly climate of Saint Domingo and to encourage and exterminate resistance made by its black inhabitants are we indebted. The truth is, Bonaparte found himself absolutely compelled, and not by Jefferson, to relinquish his daring plan of colonizing the banks of Mississippi. So even today, U.S. history textbook tells the story of Louisiana purchase without admitting that slave revolution in Saint Domingo made it possible. And here is another irony. Haitian had opened 1804 by announcing their grand experience of a society whose basis for citizenship was literally the renunciation of white privilege. But their revolution success had at the same time delivered the Mississippi Valley to a new empire of slavery. The great continent would incubate a second slavery exponentially greater in economic power than the first. So basically, according to this individual in the book, he's saying that because of the Haitian Revolution, right? And when they ran the French up out of there, basically the French people decided to go elsewhere. So they decided to go to what is now known as Louisiana, but that whole territory, right, the whole area, the middle part of the United States was considered as Louisiana Purchase. So the French, because they got kicked up out of Haiti, they said, well, okay, we got to go elsewhere then. Where we going to go to make our money? They went to Louisiana. All right. They went to the Mississippi Valley because Louisiana is located in the Mississippi Valley area. And they figured Louisiana was the best spot and location where they could continue the slave practice, where they continue to make their income, their profit. Because pretty much the slave revolt in Haiti stopped all the process. It pretty much stopped all of that. So, because the former slaves basically said they weren't going to tolerate it anymore. They weren't going to let the French just continue to take over their land. So the French had to go elsewhere. All right. But again, you can get this book, but it's funny to me. If a white man write this book about slavery, it's okay. That's the part that baffles me. But if it comes from a black person that's outside the United States, then it's a problem. I just don't understand. I don't get that. But I'm showing y'all got that confirmation bias mindset where it's okay when white people or non-black people tell the story about black history. But when it comes to black people that are outside the United States and they know the history and they tell the story and their ancestors have been part of the Atlantic slave trade, then it's a problem. It's an issue. I don't get it. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense. It'll never make sense to me. It never made sense to me. But at the end of the day, they still telling the story about our history, right? But Yvette Carnell said, "Well, I'm so black immigrants." Hold on, shit. Yvette Carnell said, well, I'm so sick of these black immigrants telling our stories, or I'm sick of these people who parents wasn't sharecroppers and all of that, talking about black history, talk about what black people been through this country. But you don't have that same smoke for white people, and their parents wasn't sharecroppers. You don't have that same smoke for white folks. You don't have that same smoke for Jewish people. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I don't really respect y'all FBA and ADOS people. I don't. I can't respect y'all for that. I can't respect y'all. Y'all are fucking prejudiced. You're fucking prejudiced. And you're doing the same thing that your white counterpart has done to us. Make it make sense. Boy. Hey, peace, sister. How you doing? How y'all doing? So, anyways, for all you scumbags and maggots out there, for you scumbag ADOS and FBA motherfuckers out there, I encourage you to read more about slavery and history. I encourage you to even deal with the science about history. So study about the science of the Bantu expansion, study about the science of, the African diaspora, okay? Get into the science, get into the history, and then we can get into the politics. Get this book, Capitalism and Slavery. I encourage it. That Half Has Never Been Told by Edward E. Baptist. Well, ain't no sense in me posting this book up but I'm going to post it up anyway. Marcus Garvey. So y'all can get a better understanding and not deal with the confirmation bias. I mean, because this is his actual speech. Okay. All right. So again, and Garvey did not identify himself as a Pan-African. He identified as a black nationalist, by the way. But it still incorporated a lot of Pan-African ideology in this book. Let's see. Thoughts on Sierra are, you know what? I'm glad that you brought that up. I haven't got a chance to read his works yet. I heard about C.L.R. James, but I have not ever got a chance to read his work. So I have to read about the Black Jacobians. I have to read that first. I never actually got a chance to look into his work, but it's interesting that you brought that information up. But I'm gonna look into it. So I'm gonna put that on my bucket list. Real talk. Yeah. So I don't know much about C.L.R. James. I heard about him, but I never really read into his material. I honestly never read his material. But I will be doing that. Okay. Shit. What else? What else I encourage y'all? I encourage y'all to read this book. Definitely read this, because again, you will learn about a lot of African history in this book and how it's incorporated in the diaspora. So Africanism in American culture. Read this goddamn book when you get a chance to. Okay. But yeah, go back and read Garvey's. In this book, it's compiled Garvey's speeches. All right, all the speeches that he has done here in America. All right. So if you guys read this book, it's called The Wise Mind of Marcus Garvey. Please read it. All right. And yesterday I was at the event that was taking place at the library. The name of this author, his name is Frederick C. Knight. Black Elders in the Meaning of Age in Slavery and Freedom. If you guys don't have this book, please put this book on your bucket list. Put it on your bucket list. All right. So it talks about the importance of Black elders and Black eldership in our community. Okay. As it goes as far back as from the time, prior to the slave trade and during the slave trade and, afterwards. So this book, I actually read it. I actually read the first chapter, and I thought it was a pretty decent book. And I encourage you all to actually, I encourage you all actually to read this goddamn book if you get a chance to. So you know what's my fact? I can go on for hours and hours with this, but I ain't gonna do that. I ain't gonna take up too much hours. Let's look up the chapter 1 where the part says honor. All right, it says the power that elders exercise rested on several premises, not the least of which was the idea of honor. Even with regional variation and changes over time, West and West Central African interact according to honor codes, which on a collective level determine social status, access to resources, and decision-making power. And it goes on to say people of honor carry particular social responsibility, and they also demand on others for public display of deference and recognition. The quest for honor could be prompt leaders to emerge who help their subjects meet goals for the common good. But because the states usually include a limited range of intangible and tangible goods, it was common for honor to be the basis of conflict, violence, struggles for power. On a more intimate intrapersonal level, honor could invoke pride or shame depending upon whether preconceived conditions were met. So rather than being a fixed social category, honor was a dynamic social and political process that accorded, respected, and bestowed authority upon individuals. And with their authority, elders set forth norms of conduct for their subordinates and established laws and order among their subjects. For example, Miguel of West Central Africa had a reputation for maintaining very good law and order in his land. All right. So it talks about honor. Now, we're going to talk about the concept of ancestor in this book. It says, when West African ancestors exercised power, they did not, when West African elders exercised power, they did so in concern with ancestors seen as extension of eldership. Through rituals, memory, and acknowledgement, living elders invoke the power and influence of the dead. The succession dispute occasioned by the death of the need of the Hine of Kamade demonstrates how descendants carry on the work of deceased elders. Ritualized collective mortuary practices were keys to making a safe passage between the worlds of the living and the dead. For one woman elder in Upper Guinea, proper burial involves a series of steps. For they placed a cloth over her corpse, brought her into the open, surrounded her, and shaded her body. In the second stage, men distraught with grief ran about the house of the deceased, continually and dismally howling in a public expression of honoring the departed. Then women began to lift up their voices in such a powerful way that one could not determine which of the sexes made the greatest noise. Next, they placed her corpse in a canoe, provisioned it with rice, palm wine, and all sorts of green plants, and took the deceased to her hometown. In the final stage, people from her hometown performed her burial, collecting funds for the drinks for the last rites and related social gatherings. Such outward gesture of care were not just about the dead, but also concerned the living, who outperformed each other in honoring the newly deceased. All right, and then this session goes into the concept of why the ancestors, right, those who are considered as ancestors, why are they honored, why they are venerated. All right. But anyways, get this book, Black Elders: The Meaning of Age in American Slavery and Freedom, by Frederick C. Knight. You can get it on Amazon. And that's all I got for y'all. That's all I have. Basically, I said what I need to say. I said what I need to say. You know, you could take it or leave it. I don't care. It's up to you. Do what the fuck you want to do. But don't say that ain't nobody ever showed y'all no information. Ain't nobody ever showed y'all about or ever talked about history. Okay? Because somebody did. You know. So like I said, you can take it or leave it. You can get in your feelings all you want to. I can give two shit about that. Because I'm going to stand on my position. And y'all not going to knock me off my square. Because y'all stuck on that bullshit. Y'all stuck on the bullshit from the ADOS and the FBA. Y'all not going to knock me off my square. I said what the fuck I said. So if you don't like it, go kick rocks. Go do whatever. I don't care. So at the end of the day, y'all have a good day. Other than that, shout out to the people in the chat. Shout out to those, except for Golden Brown, not that pseudo. But shout out to all the rest of y'all that's coming into the chat. For those of you that's just tuning in. You know, if you just watch the video from the very beginning. Shout out to Norman Richmond. Shout out to integrated school psychologist. Shout out to that sister. Of course, shout out to Lions Time Baby. Fuck you, Black Exodus. Fuck you. You coming on here talking shit, you little trolling ass motherfucker. Golden Brown, fuck you. Yeah, but anyways, y'all have a good evening. I will come back and build with y'all later. And I'll be looking in the comment section. I can't guarantee that I will respond to all the comments. All right. But yeah, but I know you ADOS and FBA gonna come back with some more shit to talk about, because that's what y'all do. Y'all get in y'all fucking feelings. But fuck y'all feelings. I don't give a fuck. Fuck y'all damn feelings. Put a condom over your heart and fuck your feelings. I say that shit. So anyway, this your girl Tiffany, and I'm out. Deuces.